Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In this video I'm going to be discussing some of the ways that you can train a horse to lay down. I'm going to show you some of the techniques that I use and some of the techniques that I personally prefer not to use. I'm bringing you this video in collaboration with Mackey, Ireland and the Irish Pony Club, so if you want to win a shout out and get involved yourself, or you want to try training your horse some tricks, make sure you watch till the end of the video and I'll explain how you can get a shout out on my Instagram. So I'm just going to dive straight into some of the other techniques which I'm sure some of you have seen used traditionally. This to me is kind of a hugely unnecessary thing to actually do to a horse, to train them something like the lay down, when there are other ways that you can do it that don't involve so much force. The guy in this video has some skill, he's obviously practiced this many times, and I think it's important to note that this type of way to train a horse to lay down, using a hobble rope and another rope attached to the head, not only does it is extremely stressful for the horse, can be. You could also kill a horse. If a horse was to rear, flip over backwards, the handler could also get killed. I can think of so many reasons not to do it this way, but I just think it's important to show that it is and has been done this way. I think this is definitely more an old-fashioned way. So you can all make your own minds up on what you think about this technique. For me, it's just something that I would never want to subject a horse to, because it's just not necessary. There are other ways to teach them the same end result, but without the risk of injury. And coming from a professional point of view, I work as an animal chiropractor. This is extremely stressful on the body, so I would definitely say that this is something that you would want to avoid. People tend to use this technique because you can get quite a quick result, but at what cost?
Noise, just kind of keep my voice going so she knows I'm here, and they'll do that. Now she's a little bit too close to this wall here, so I'm going to kind of let her up.
So here is just another example of a different person using the same technique. They have to use a hobble rope around the fetlock and the pastern, which already is quite a delicate area. There's lots of important structures around there, so to tie a rope and to be applying considerable force there in order to force an animal to the floor, there's a lot of risk involved and it's just not required. See, I think it's important to note that just the clips that I'm using of this technique for reference, both of the horses that you're seeing in these videos using the hobble technique, for sure it's not their first time having been exposed to this training technique. You can see here this horse, he flexes the head, ties the leg up, and the horse just lays down. If that was every horse's initial response to that pressure, and that's what they all did automatically, then there would be no problem with this. But the horse is a fight or flight animal, and when you tie their leg up to their chest and then restrict their head, well, they can no longer flee from you, so then their only option is to fight. And this kind of technique is you need to get past the fight with the horse to force them to the floor to then release the pressure. So it's just such an unnecessary battle. Some horses can get really anxious and stressed, and the chance of injury is it's very, very high. I mean, you can see the amount of stress that this horse has placed on the front leg that is bent and the one that is straight. So just having quickly touched on those methods, I'm sure you all have your own opinions on it, but I just wanted to show that that is a way that you can do it. It's not something that I would ever advocate doing, and I certainly don't agree with it, because there are so many other ways to get the same result that do not involve pain and excessive pressure and force. So with all that kind of said and out of the way, I'm just going to show you some of the techniques that I've used to teach my horses to lay down. I think first off, the most important thing to say is with horses, with anything, there's not really like a 1 + 2 = 3 scenario that you can guarantee that if you do this technique with a certain horse that you're going to get that result. I think you need to be quite flexible in your training and a little bit inventive. I will discuss slightly the differences in the ways that I've trained all of my horses to lay down, because I've trained 3 of my horses to lay down and all of them have learned slightly differently. There's not been a consistent kind of technique with all of them. And I think that's important, is just to have that flexibility and that ability to adapt to a specific horse. That's what I think kind of makes a good horse trainer, is being able to adapt your training and yourself to kind of suit the horse. So with my little pony Apple, I've only owned her for a few weeks. In the beginning stages of asking a horse to lie down, I think it's very, very important that they are comfortable having you around them when they're on the ground, when they're rolling. So most horses, especially if you're on the yard a lot, you'll have the chance or the opportunity to see them rolling, whether that's when they go into the field or when the stable has a fresh bed of bedding or straw, for example. So I think in the beginning stages, it's very important just to have your horse comfortable with you being around them when they're rolling. At this stage, Apple hasn't had any training. This is just her had a bath, put out in the paddock. She's rolled, and we're just kind of giving her some food, trying to get close to her, just getting her used to us being around her, and that nothing's going to happen when we are around her. You can see with this pony, she's very comfortable to roll around humans. Some horses might not be, and this stage might take you some time. With Apple, I was very lucky. I'd only owned her for several days at this stage, and this made it a lot easier for me to teach her to lay down because I didn't have to get her used to me being around her when she rolled. So just a little side note. The next stage is to actually kind of start adding in the cue. So how are we going to get the horse to think and to realize that we want something from them? So I think in the beginning it's always very useful to make the horse wet. So when a horse has had a shower, they usually want to roll, and this is kind of what we want to monopolize on. So before I kind of explain how I am training Apple currently, I'm just going to take a little step back in time, and I'm going to show you some footage from my horse Boo 8 years ago when I initially started to teach her to lay down. The basic principle is still very similar, but some important things like my cue and my use of vocal aids and food have changed, for example. So in the beginning, when I started to train Boo, this is at home in Ireland where we used to live. So I've taken Boo to her favourite place to roll because I'm hoping that that's going to encourage her to do so. Back when I didn't really have much experience with this, I was just kind of using food to kind of bribe her to lie down. And it did work, but I had to actually reshape the trick over the coming years and actually add a different cue. If I could be critical of myself in these clips, I would say if I could go back in time and this was now, I would say that every time that she's showing signs of rolling or getting close to the ground, that I would have actually preferred to have introduced my cue already. My cue is either, depending on the horse, tapping on the belly gently with a stick or tapping on the back of the legs with a stick. In the beginning with Boo, I trained her to lay down by just encouraging her to roll and by really encouraging and rewarding the behaviour that she showed leading up to laying down. So it's important to know that before a horse is going to roll, they're going to lower the head, they're going to sniff the ground. Some horses will paw the floor and some will make a little circle and they'll find their little place that they want to lay down. So we're really just encouraging them to do that and rewarding them for each little step that they make. I actually, with Boo now, don't require treats to get her to lay down. I had to gently kind of wean her off of the off of the food onto kind of pressure and release. When I say pressure and release, I don't mean anything like in the videos I showed you in the beginning. By that, I mean that when I am tapping on the belly or the back of the legs, that she understands that that pressure means to lay down. Not that it's done with any kind of force. In this old footage you're seeing of Boo, it's really just her showing interest in rolling, and anything that she does, pawing, circling, lowering the head, I reward. And it's just about trying to kind of get the horse to give you a little bit more each time. And I'd say with horses, not just with strict training, but timing is key. You don't want to miss subtle little things that the horse does to take a step in the right direction, and then you don't reward that. You can actually end up confusing the horse. So I always in the beginning try to reward their little attempts and then try to get them slowly to give you more, to kind of build on that. I'm going to talk a little bit later on in the video about how I kind of revamped Boo's laying down and I kind of taught her with a different technique. Now we're going to move to Apple. So this was the first time that I actually introduced the whip cue into Apple's training. When I start introducing the whip in the first few sessions, I don't contact the horse with the stick because I don't want to distract from what they're doing. I just want them to be used to the stick being in that area and knowing that it's not there to cause them any harm or damage. This is one of the first times that she actually laid down on command, where I'd say she'd really started to kind of link it all together and understood that this was kind of the end goal. I'm using a mix of food and touch to reward her. I think it's very important that you don't have to rely on food. I like to use a little bit of food in the beginning because I do think it's a helpful motivator. But like I said, down the line, you want to be able to rely on other forms of praise.
Good girl. Super. Super. And then I don't give her any food when she stands up. Good girl.
So this is the next time we trained. I think this is 2 or 3 mornings later. So we've headed out to where I know that she kind of likes to roll. And you can see the first thing she does is lower her head. So I'm very quick there. I start tapping the belly immediately because I want her to start to think that, oh, if I'm rolling, she's touching my belly, to kind of make that association between the two things. So I'm just trying to encourage her to keep some movement, not to stand still, not to just kind of give up. I see I'm touching the belly again, just letting her know that I do have food because I hadn't actually given her any food reward at this stage yet. So although I'm not tapping the belly yet here, what's important to note is that I do have some contact with the stick against the belly, and it's just the repetition of that over your training sessions and you being very consistent and clear with the horse about what you're looking for. One thing I do want to say is with regards to trick training, longer isn't better. Try to keep things short and sweet so that the horse is motivated and interested and engaged when you finish the session. You never want to kind of finish the session and the horse has gotten bored and lost interest. So just keep that in mind, that short is sweet. I also think it's important to say that if your horse is a little bit sensitive with the stick or they've had some negative experiences in the past, you might have to spend some time doing some desensitizing training with the stick in order for you to actually be able to use it effectively as a tool. This is also another important note. When your horse does roll or get on the ground, try to encourage to keep them there. Obviously don't apply any force, but if they like to be scratched, you put in your maximum effort and you give them the best scratch you can, because it should be it should be a fun experience to do these things, to interact with people in this way. Just as another side note, a lot of people like to use clicker training with the little clicker machine that you pop and it makes a sound. I actually find those pretty difficult to coordinate, so I actually just rather have a clear vocal cue, whether that's a whistle or good boy, good girl, whatever you use. Just make sure that your sound for when they do something right, make sure that that is consistent. I've seen many people training with similar techniques, but with a focus on first training the horse to lower the head, then teaching the horse to kind of paw with the front leg, and then teaching them to bring the back legs under. I haven't actually needed to teach the final stage because I found once the horse was first of all wet and they were lowering the ground and pawing the ground, I didn't actually find I ever had to bother to train them to bring the hind end underneath. It was just something I never had to do with my particular horses, not saying that that will be the case for every horse, but just that it was something that I never needed to do. So with Boo, I spent a lot of time training her how to bow correctly. I taught her to do it on both the left and the right side. You can see here, this is what the finished trick looked like. I was then able to actually use that trick to teach her to actually kneel. So you can see I'm just able to touch both legs. In the beginning you can see she's a little bit confused, she's hopping from leg to leg, that's actually what I want. And then with a little bit of practice she learned pretty quickly that if I tap both legs on the front, I wanted her to lie down, or I could tap the left and the right leg individually to get a bow on the respective sides. If any of you start trick training with your horses, be sure to tag me and use the hashtag Mackey Trick Challenge, and I will be posting your attempts on my Instagram stories.